Hello, 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 everyone. I was at the New York Film Festival. You might have heard about it. We're going to talk about another film. The Room Next Door is the latest film by Pedro Almodovar, who is probably the most well-known director out of Spain. He's jump-started the careers of Penelope Cruz and Antonio Banderas, who are his most frequent on-screen collaborators. He's made some pretty incredible films like Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, All About My Mother, Talk to Her, Volver, Broken Embraces, and Pain and Glory, which I reviewed on this channel 5 years ago. Almodovar during the Q&A said that he wants to make as many films as possible. The film was about his declining health and his thirst for life and needing to express himself, and it's really shown in his output in the last 5 years. In 2020, he directed his first ever English language film, the short called The Human Voice, which I reviewed here on the channel. I really liked it. Then his next feature film, Parallel Mothers, played at the New York Film Festival in 2021. I saw it that year and I was so unimpressed by it, I didn't even bother reviewing it for the channel. Then he directed another short film in 2023, Strange Way of Life, which was his second attempt at an English language film, but here, unlike The Human Voice, it was based on his original screenplay, and his style did not translate well here, in my opinion. And for some reason, the presentation wasn't even up to his standards. It just didn't hit. I feel like Almodovar was very much out of his element here, and now with The Room Next Door, it's pretty obvious that Almodovar feels more comfortable with the English language to write a feature-length screenplay, also with more big-name actors, working with Tilda Swinton for a second time and Julianne Moore for the first time. And unfortunately, I just did not like this movie. I could not get on board because, again, I feel like Pedro Almodovar's writing style doesn't translate well to English from Spanish. In Spanish, his overly expository dialogue works because it feels like an elevated, even more melodramatic telenovela. In English, with our monotonous, dry accents and grounded performances, it's clunky, and it feels like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. In turn, the sequence of events feels more unearned than it already would be. So by the time we get to the most critical scenes, I am just so disconnected by what is happening. I think what is a little more interesting though is what happened after the movie ended and what the response to that thing was. So before I tell you that, I'm giving The Room Next Door a 5 out of 10. I understand that having your films in English gives it more visibility in America, but there is an unflattering styles clash at play that is impossible to ignore. And yeah, I didn't really touch on all of the other aspects of the film, but there's not a whole lot of visual exploration on Almodovar's part in terms of the last couple of years. I feel like a lot of what Almodovar did in Pain and Glory is more experimental than what he did in this film, and it's a little bit more cohesive than Parallel Mothers, which was kind of like a fun but also staggered story that was trying to do too many things. This film is doing one thing, but it's not doing it well enough. And again, with the language translation, it's an issue that bleeds into almost everything that gets you invested in a film. And knowing Almodovar, will get another film from him within the next year or two, and hopefully that film is the best film he's made in years. Anyway, let's talk about what happened at this Q&A. So about 5 to 10 minutes into the Q&A, a protest broke out. Yeah, a protest in the middle of a Q&A in a theater. I was shocked, but I was like, all right, this is interesting. Two brave people stood up, stated their cause, which for YouTube algorithm purposes, I will not say, but let's just call them pro-peace protesters. And the old white audience surrounding them didn't like it very much. The audience booed them relentlessly, and one old person took it upon themselves to attempt to rip the banner that these two pro-peace protesters were holding. So much for the tolerant left, am I right, fellas? And it was very interesting seeing this occur in front of me because at the film festival, you were being shown exclusively films about empathy and seeing other perspectives, other, parts of the world, and having to challenge yourself to understand another point of view and another way of life. And the way that these people in this audience reflexively snapped back into their reactionary behavior, it was like I was watching National Geographic Geographic in front of me, and I was stunned. So everything kind of froze for a second when Tilda Swinton and Pedro Almodovar both stood up and requested that they hear what the protesters had to say. They asked security, who was holding the protesters back, to let them on the stage so the protesters could use their mic to speak. Security did not let them do that. Dennis Lim, the head of the selection committee at the New York Film Festival, who was there facilitating the Q&A, didn't move a muscle. He was frozen. So the protesters were basically forced to explain their position in an echoey theater where they were still getting booed. Now, you might be wondering, why aren't you showing what happened? The New York Film Festival always posts their Q&As. Well, they posted this one, but they purposefully deleted that segment from it so you would never know what happened.
And then, after 145 pages, then I thought, well, this is a movie that I want to do.
Really what this film is about. It's about the room next door. We are in the room next door to each one of each other, and we're in the room next door to Syria, to Beirut tonight.
Yes.
We're
Yes,
in the room next
absolutely.
door to Gaza, to Jerusalem.
Yes.
To China. We are in the room next door, and what Pedro has done for 23.
Luckily, I was there, and after snapping out of the trance that I was in watching this unfold, I pulled out my phone and I recorded a good amount of it.
No, but excuse me. But if they want to say anything, we allow them to say. I give you, the mic. If you have to say something, 1 minute.
Thank you. No, I would say it's a dignifying thing for this festival to have the opportunity for these people to come here and speak with you.
Unfortunately, in this strange world, that there is more than one world, and I really would like to have a solution for that. And really, from here, I would really ask the three big powers in the world: China, United States, Japan, India. All of them that they have veto en la ONU. Que pongan fin a esta situación. Desgraciadamente, una película nunca es suficiente.
Yeah, and so I would wish for all these strong powers who can veto in the UN could put an end to this, because a movie is just not enough.
I'm sorry, I really would like that a movie could be strong enough to do something.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry for the interruption, but as a festival, we also stand for artistic freedom and freedom of expression.
Everything is fine.
Actually,
to take us back to the film, I would suggest, without stretching the point, that this is actually really what this film is about. It's about the room next door. We are in the room next door to each one of each other, and we're in the room next door to Syria, to Beirut.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And although it was really hard to hear what they had to say, I was very much aware of what they were protesting because there was an open letter written by many of the filmmakers who attended the festival asking for a very specific demand. So let me fill you in on what that demand was. These film festivals need sponsors since our government cares more about doing murder overseas than it does about supporting the arts. So these festivals end up having to collaborate with a slew of seedy organizations who need really good PR, including Bloomberg Philanthropies. Bloomberg Philanthropies facilitates illegal settlement infrastructure building in the occupied West Bank, which is again illegal. Ethnic cleansing is bad, even when we're doing it. It's actually the subject of one of the major documentaries that played at this year's New York Film Festival. When global tensions rose at the beginning of October, the filmmakers behind No Other Land had to skip the Q&A of the screening I went to so they can take a flight and go be with their families. The New York Film Festival had no problem parading that all over their socials. So why not this form of protest? Why not the open letter that the directors of No Other Land signed? Some people may say, well, they don't want to enable other protesters. It didn't really matter because this happened at another one of my screenings. During O Canada, some people got up during the film and did a climate protest. And besides that, the main actor and the director, who Film at Lincoln Center is celebrating next year with a whole gala dedicated to him, encouraged the protesters to speak and say their piece. So it's not like the people in that room, who were the center of attention at the time, were upset by their interruption because it was for a good reason. A reason they expanded upon and piggybacked off of it in their continued discussion of the film once the protesters were ejected, because the film is about death. And finally, I think New York Film Festival's actions and inaction about this moment is beyond unacceptable, because this festival, again, is supposed to be a haven for people to express challenging points of view from parts of the world where most of the establishment turns a blind eye. And this form of a cover-up is not only disappointing, but it's hypocritical, and they have to do better in the future. I hope they do better in the future. Protests by nature are supposed to be disruptive, so diffusing protests to me is a fascist action, but hey, I'm not running this event, so it's not up to me. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you agree or disagree, tell us in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share with your friends. Do all the things. We have a Patreon. Take a look at it. We're building it out. And yeah, that's it. Bye-bye.